Hey everyone! Today I'll be showing you the second part of the series in which I show you my favorite opening of all time, my beloved Philidor defense, or what I like to call the Snapping Turtle, and how I found success with this opening even against the strongest opponents. And today we'll be covering the scary variation, or what people call the anti-Philidor variation, coming straight up. So what is the anti-Philidor variation? And why do I call it the scary variation? Well, the reason why I call it the scary variation is because when you first take a look at it and you think to yourself, wow, this looks very bad for black. And this is the scary variation, or what we call the anti-Philidor in this position. Pawn f4 in this position, basically white is trying to shove his pawns up your throat and basically just push, push, push until they can win the game. And I can assure you that this variation, though it looks scary, is quite harmless if black knows what he or she is doing. So first off, we have to do something about this e5 move. And if you think about it, if we play a move like pawn c6, then yes, of course we might get into a terrible position because we're getting squished here. And getting squished is never too good in the opening. So we just play one of the normal moves. And again, if you checked out my previous video on the Philidor, well, this move shouldn't come too much of a surprise. Pawn e5. Now you might think to yourself, wait a second, Sean, that's a little bit weird of a move. Can't white capture, black captures, white captures, black captures, and white can capture over here, and king capture over here? Isn't this very bad for black because his king can't castle? And the answer is no. In a lot of these Philidor positions, it's okay to not castle your king if you get one or both of these things, which black has. Well, first of all, in this position, black has more development over here, so black is already quite happy. But the second thing that is actually more important in this position is that this e4 weakness that we attack in all the variations in the Philidor is super duper weak in this position because this f pawn, which again will be a pattern as we see later on, is no longer here because it went to f4. So you cannot defend this pawn with a move like pawn f3. So this pawn is much weaker. So if our opponent plays a move like bishop f4, main line, we play bishop d6 protecting our knight, white castles, and in this position we can play king e7. There's a lot of good moves in this variation right now. So I prefer this king move, and after our opponent moves a move like knight f3, we have this very special move knight d3 check, bishop captures, and we take the bishop on f4. And basically for the rest of the game we're going to try to win using our double bishop advantage, but not just that, we're going to try to take advantage of this weakness on e4. So we're not scared of him or her just capturing e5 twice. And if they just capture once, but they don't capture a second time, and they play a move like pawn d5, well, you can just call white a goner in this position. Because black can play bishop c5, take advantage of this very nice diagonal that white so kindly gave to us. We can even play bishop b4 and say, hey, I want to capture an e4 pawn. The world is our oyster in this position, with moves like knight c5 in the future, because white is overextending with too many of their pawns, and that the dark squares are extremely weak in these positions. We are very happy with how things are turning out, and so we're not scared of this variation whatsoever as well. Now, what if they just capture this way? Well, just capturing here, again, same idea, bishop here, and as you will see, this e4 pawn is weaker than even normal variations, and because both the f pawn and d pawn can no longer support it. So what is the main line here? Well, after pawn e5, the main line is knight f3, basically putting more pressure on e5. And here, well, we have to do something about this because our opponent is threatening to win the pawn right now. And here, you might be tempted to play a move like knight here, which defends the pawn, but not really, because h3 kicks the knight back and we lose the pawn still. And the only other way that seems to defend the pawn is a move like queen e7. But after queen e7, our opponent can play this very nasty knight b5 move, threatening to win this pawn with a fork against the king and rook. And the question is, what do we do against this? There really is nothing good we can do. Queen back, we lose the pawn in e5. King over here, well, we can't castle. That's not good. So we're actually forced to capture on d4. And again, people would think, oh, isn't this just terrible for black? Because, hey, these pawns look like they could push at any moment. And to be honest, the answer is no, not really. I like to think about this as an advantage for black because, hey, guess what? We have an open e-file. And if you guys remember the previous video, what was the entire point of this opening? Well, it's quite simple. The point of this opening is to attack the e4 pawn, which is even weaker since f4 no longer can protect the pawn in e4, and we can now use all our pieces to attack very easily. Just think about it this way. In this position, if we were given infinite moves, we would play bishop here. We have a very nice long diagonal for our bishop. We would castle. We would play rook e8, attacking e4. Where do you think this bishop would go? Pause your videos and try to think. And if you guys thought of pawn b6 to play bishop b7 and just attack e4 again, ding ding ding, you absolutely got that correct. And where is this knight going to go? Well, knight c5. Why? To attack e4. Again, this is one of the reasons why I love this opening so much. All the pieces are coming together as one to attack a single point, and so many people will falter in this position. In fact, one of my most memorable chess memories was that there used to be a kid tournament that I used to play in which it was a provincial tournament, so it was very big. And when I first joined the tournament, I was a very new player. I only knew the 4-move checkmate, thought it was the best opening in the world, and then I got absolutely smashed at that tournament. I got like 50th, 60th place out of like 60 people. And I thought to myself, well, maybe this game wasn't for me. But what I decided to do was I decided to work hard, and I decided to, start learning different openings. There was one player who would always beat me, and that player wasn't even the top 3 members. He was like number 5 every year. And he used to play the Queen's Indian, so I learned the counter to that, and I beat him. In the following 3 years, I think 3 years after the first year I went, I beat him. I was very happy. But I still had the hardest people to play. I still had like number 1, number 2, number 3. And against the number 1 player who always played very strongly against everybody, just to destroy everybody. He was a FIDE master, I believe. Well, after I played against him as white in the tournament. In my final year that I could play in this kid tournament, which was, well, not really kid, but I was grade 12. But what happened was I was able to play this variation of the Philidor. He told me after the game he doesn't encounter this opening at all. In fact, this is why I like this opening so much, because nobody knows how to play against it. So he played this variation, and I actually won the e4 pawn very, very, very early. And then once winning that e4 pawn, I immediately offered a draw. He accepted it, and I was able to get tied for first. Now, in the end, I did lose the playoff match, so I didn't win first place and was able to represent Ontario for the Canadian National Championship. But I was very proud of that game because it showed me that ever since my dream in like grade 7 to become number 1 or number 2 for the provincial tournament, it took a couple years, right? Sorry, it wasn't grade 12. I believe it was like grade 10 or something. I don't quite remember. Yeah, it was grade 10 or something. Well, I think so. Not too sure. I'm gonna have to check that. But after all the hard work, I was able to, come out on top after a while and be able to beat people who I in no way could have defeated many years before. Anyways, enough of me rambling about these stories. They're just very good. So in this position, a lot of people mess up. I want you to think to yourself, which piece would you capture back with, queen or knight? And both are viable, but for me, there's only one move that really makes a lot of sense in this position. And in the game that I will show you guys in the future, in this scary variation, I will show you what I played against the Harvard chess team, and how I was able to get a draw against another FIDE master quite easily as black, against somebody who was much, much, much higher rated than me. So in this position, well, a lot of people take with a knight, because knight just looks normal. In the Sicilian, you take with a knight, so why not in this position? Well, in this position, I want you to think about what white's plan is. And if you don't actually think about what white's plan is in this position, you might play the wrong move, which is knight captures. Well, white's plan in this position is to play e5 and basically get rid of that e4 pawn as soon as possible. If you don't get rid of this e4 pawn, well, it becomes a weakness that black can attack for the rest of the game. So how can we play pawn e5? Well, queen captures makes a lot of sense because we're threatening e5. Now you might say to me, but Sean, all my other teachers taught me that moving the queen out too early in the game is bad. But I want you to ask why. If you guys haven't checked out my video, I seriously recommend that video as well. Ask yourself, why do your teachers teach you that? Well, the reason why is because the queen can get kicked around like a beach ball, right? But in this position, it can't get kicked around at all. I can't move my knight back to b8 to play c6, right? So the queen is completely safe on d4, and it's also threatening a move like pawn e5, which we will get to later on. But what do we do if our opponent plays knight takes here? Well, if our opponent plays knight takes here, well, I just chuckle to myself. You should chuckle to yourself too if you see this move, because your opponent obviously is on autopilot, not thinking about what they should do. Well, here, you're given a lot of time. Your opponent's not threatening e5 anytime soon. So just play a move like pawn g6, or play a move like knight c5. Just take advantage of your opponent's lack of, well, I was going to say brain, but lack of a plan here. So Pawn g6 I really like, but I believe knight c5 is the main move. Pawn g6 just says, hey, you're going to give me time, I'm just going to fianchetto, move my rook to e8, what you going to do about that? And funny enough, in that a Harvard game that I'll be showing you guys in the future, my opponent just moved knight back to f3 because he realized, wait a second, perhaps this was not the best idea to capture the knight. So after knight captures, well, yeah, just play pawn g6, and if they move something back, well, you're just going to develop your pieces, and there's nothing too special in these type of positions here, because, well, you get a very nice file over here. And the thing is, unlike in a lot of like Grand Prix situations in which they have e4, f4, your opponent doesn't really want to push this pawn over here, because now you have the e5 square all to yourself. You can play like knight here, knight there, and look how strong this knight on e5 is. This e5 square is an outpost. So yeah, there's not much to be scared of here. In fact, there was a player, I believe I was able to beat just very quickly because, what did they play? Let me remember. Oh, so here, I beat like an 1800, I remember extremely quickly, because what happened was they played like bishop e3, I played bishop here, they played bishop e2, I castled, they castled, I played rook e8 attacking the pawn, bishop f3, and then on my very next move, I played a very nice move, and my opponent's like, uh-oh, what to do? And the move is, well, if you guessed it, it was a move I mentioned before, knight c5, attacking this e4 pawn. And you will think to yourself, well, no, that's easy to defend. The pawn's in the center, easy to defend. Like, look, we already have two defenders. And so I'll ask you, how do you defend this pawn? And funnily enough, it's kind of impossible, because queen over there, we just capture a queen, easy peasy. And, well, the pawn's kind of lost. Three attackers, pawn is weak, can't play f3. So you might have to sacrifice the pawn, but if you sacrifice, black is already slightly better here. Anyways, that was just a game that I want to show you. So again, the idea of this is very simple. You just develop pieces. Rook e8, b6. Well, don't play b6 too early, because if you play b6 too early, knight c6 and come trap your queen. Don't do that. But in the future, you want to play something like this, knight c5, attack e4, win e4, and then win the game, because your pawn structure is very solid. And white has to come up with a plan, which is actually very difficult in these situations. So let's say your opponent's not silly and he plays queen takes. Now, g6 not viable anymore because, well, we're creating a very big weakness on this diagonal, but also e5 is being threatened here. So you want to play pawn e5, pawn c6. Pawn c6 has two ideas. The first one is you can play queen b6, trade off queens. If you trade off queens, e4 pawn gets even weaker. The more pieces I traded off, the more apparent weaknesses become in chess. So after this move over here, if they decide to play e5, this position should be completely fine. From what I recall, I believe you just capture, pawn captures, and I think you just get moves like bishop c5, and things are looking pretty good for you because white is overextended, can't castle over here, and well, the situation just looks pretty good here for black. So here he can't really push unless if he knows what's good for him, so you might play bishop e3, and now this is the critical move in this position. You cannot really play queen b6, and you don't want to play something passive like queen c7, because if you're just playing passive, your opponent gains all the space, well then, why did he give all the space to begin with? So then what move should he play in this position? Very important to remember, pawn d5. So what does pawn d5 do? It breaks the position open in the center, and basically says to white, hey, your king's not castled, you're gaining so much space, so what if I try to attack you? What are you going to do about that? And so the main line here is essentially pawn captures, we played this bishop c5 idea, and very important to note, the queen cannot check us, so the queen is forced to go back. So let's say queen goes back here, we play queen e7, attacking this e3 bishop, and so our opponent cannot move like king over here, because then we just knight check and win the bishop, so that would be very nice. So after queen check over here, our opponent has a couple moves they can go for. The most common move is knight here. After knight there, we just play knight b6, stopping knight to f5 ideas, and basically we're gambiting our pawn so that we can have, well, an advantage here, so we can maybe trick our opponent, we get a lot of, tempo, initiative. So our opponent cannot capture here, he has to capture there. In this type of position, he might, I believe, castle queenside. Looks about right. Actually, no, I don't think he can castle queenside. Let me remember why he cannot castle queenside in this position. If he castles queenside, I believe black can just play a move like, can he play bishop a6 in this position? He might be able to play bishop a6. Castling looks pretty fine as well. And the thing is, in this position, we sacrifice the pawn, but we have a lot of activity. We get the d5 square, which is very good. We have the e4 square, which is very good. And yeah, it's up to white to basically defend in these type of positions. But, so after this, let's say our opponent decides to play pawn e5 instead. If our opponent plays pawn e5, well, bishop c5 still comes in. queen goes to d3. If queen goes to d3, well, we just castle in this type of position. And if we castle, you might think to yourself, wait, that's a free knight. Why would we do that? Well, the idea is we can take on e3, and we have a huge advantage here because queen cannot capture, he cannot castle kingside. And the reason why he can't take here, by the way, with the queen very much is because rook e8 is just very good. Rook e8, knight e5, and after knight e5, g takes f6 with the pawn capturing here. Black has huge center, huge advantage. What more can you want here? So, after this, queen d3 is played, and after this move over here, we can play queen b6, targeting the weaknesses on the dark squares. If they capture us, we can capture back on c5. We get this e4 square, which is very nice for us, and we also get to control the light squares very much. And it's just a game here. So this is probably the scariest variation that your opponent can play. If they know what they're doing, they take on d4, and then they want to play pawn e5, and you know the intent. Well, then all you have to do is remember this d5 move, but the idea is a bishop c5 to break free in your position, and you will be absolutely a-okay. Alright guys, so we went through a lot of variations today. We went through, well, mainly we went through this variation over here, in which our opponent plays pawn f4, but we learned what to do if he captures once, captures twice, captures no times, what to do if he plays knight f3, what if he captures back with a knight, what to do if queen captures back. And we see that once we know what we're doing, this variation is not too scary. And it's actually a variation that I think is much better than this f4 variation that I will cover in a following video. And that's this very spooky pawn h3 variation. And you might think, well, wait a second, that pawn h3 move doesn't look very good. What is it trying to do? Well, we'll see it in the future video. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to press that like and subscribe button. We just got past 300 subscribers. I just want to thank every single one of you guys for helping me surpass that threshold. And I hope we can learn together more chess so we can all improve in the future as well. Alright, I'll see you in the next video.